Autopilot disengaged. It was our senior year of high school that it happened. Okay, so we went from 4th grade to senior year, and you're still thinking this is a prank? Are you even awake right now? Am I even real? Are you even actually watching a YouTube video right now? At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. Converse are popular sneakers. A little out of fashion, but still. What? A little out of fashion? Converse are timeless. Boo! Did I scare you? Good, cause it's freaking spooky month. So hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Laylah, and it's spooky month, so we're doing spooky things. Today, we're going to be checking out the subreddit No Sleep, which we're no stranger to the subreddit on this channel, but in case you are, this is a subreddit where people can share fictional, scary stories made to sound really real. And occasionally you'll come across real stories, and you ask yourself, is that allowed on here? To my knowledge, the majority of them are fiction. Yeah, the last time we checked this out was way back in July, and I definitely wanted to check it out again this spooky month. I looked up some of the most classic, scary, no-sleep stories, so hopefully there's a little something for all of us to enjoy. So everyone, what I want you to do is to grab your snacks, grab your drinks, get all comfy cozy, and let's just dive right in with our first no-sleep story. The Smiling Man by _title. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could get to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoe steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray, or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me, and then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the hell do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper, "What the fuck?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling menacingly. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back into a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Honestly, what do you do when you see something like that? I don't even know. Anyways, on to the next one. I've come to terms with the fact that everything I know is a dream. And this is by 𝘞𝘦𝘭𝘰𝘮𝘦. As a preface, please note that this will probably be very long. I don't care if nobody reads it. Everyone in the world could read it and nothing would change. I just need to voice my concerns for my own sake. Perhaps by organizing everything on a page, I can make sense of things. Several years ago, I was in a brutal car accident. I was parked in front of a train track, waiting for the train to pass by. I was the last person not to make it across the tracks. For visualization, there was a solid stream of cars on either side. If I had tried to sneak across, I would have rear-ended the person in front of me before successfully clearing them. I could hear the train approaching, and the black and yellow bars lowered in front of me. I am fascinated by trains, so I was delighted to be so close, finally getting a front row seat. The train was about a quarter mile from the crossing when the driver behind me accelerated and nudged me forward a few feet. That's illegal, isn't it? The bars bent and eventually snapped, and I was knocked joltingly onto the tracks. This is all the person's fault behind you! I panicked and threw the car into reverse, trying to back out. The other car apparently had more horsepower, however, and to my horror, my car door aligned perfectly with the cattle guard on the front of the train. I scrambled to get out of the car, but forgot about my seatbelt. I nearly strangled myself trying to get free. By the time I unlatched it, it was too late. 1 fraction of a second of the loudest sound I had ever heard, and then blackness and silence. I was certain that I had died. I didn't feel any pain, and certainly if I had survived, I'd be in agony. I tried to open my eyes, but nothing would happen. I tried to make a sound, to wiggle my fingers, or to do anything, but I couldn't. It wasn't that I was paralyzed, it was more like I didn't have a body to manipulate. I was just a mind submerged in a pool of nothing. The only sentiment I felt was that I had returned to that state after being gone for a long time, like forgetting how your parents' house smells until you visit home for the holidays. Gradually, I started to have feelings of sensation. Passing waves of warmth and wetness finally allowed me to determine where the edges of my body were. Almost as soon as I became aware of my physical self, it began to ache. I felt as if every inch of me had been pummeled with a baseball bat, the heavy wooden kind. Even opening my eyes was a spectacular ordeal. I was in a hospital. So I had survived after all. People moved to surround me. Faces that never fully came into focus hovered above my own, and sounds that vaguely resembled speech seemed to reach me through water. It wasn't long before I felt weak again, and my eyes closed. This fading in and out of consciousness lasted for what felt like a very long time, maybe months, though the doctors told me it was only a matter of days. After that, I worked on speaking and swallowing food, which seems silly, but it was actually a challenge at the time. Finally, as more and more casts were removed, I was allowed to sit up and turn my head, for which I was incredibly grateful. According to my family, and my then-girlfriend Sarah, all of whom were overjoyed at being able to speak with me, I was asleep for several days on end after the crash. I remember Sarah specifically saying she had missed being able to stare at those beautiful eyes. Time passed at an excruciatingly slow pace until physical therapy finally escalated to the point where I could be pushed around in a wheelchair. The doctors were surprisingly hopeful that I'd be able to walk again, but it was what they called cautious optimism, or cautionism. Nobody wanted to tell me I could be independent again, and then have to admit they were wrong later. Obviously, I was very hopeful myself, though even transferring from chair to bed was a painful challenge. It was around this time that I noticed I never dreamed anymore. When I slept, I only felt the same nothingness that I felt immediately after the crash. All the days blended together for a while after that. The next memory I can actually separate from the rest is the first time I tried walking on my own. There were staff members holding onto my arms and waist, just in case I fell, and with their help, I made it all the way across the room on my first try. The doctors said they had never seen such a rapid recovery. I was giddy. Obviously, I wasn't out of the woods yet, but soon I was allowed to live at home again, with frequent PT sessions, and some weeks after that, I returned to work. That's the real nightmare, going back to work after something like that. Life was almost normal for a while, except for a very slight limp in my left leg, the side that the train hit me on. I was feeling pretty normal. It was only after about a month of living in my own house that weird things started to happen. The first thing I noticed was that I felt an occasional stinging on my right forearm, like a thin needle was puncturing my skin. It was a tiny prick, maybe twice a day at most. I figured it was just nerve trauma or something and blocked it from my mind. Feigning ignorance was harder to do when I started hearing things, though. While I was reading in bed one night, I thought I heard Sarah crying. I strained my ears to make sure, and I definitely heard her sobs, but very distantly, like I was submerged in a pool. I made my way downstairs quickly, concerned that she had hurt herself or something, but she was just washing dishes in the kitchen. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously. "Yeah, why?" she asked nonchalantly. "No reason." I dismissed these oddities as best I could. After all, how could anyone expect to recover from being hit by a dang train without some lingering effects? Every so often, mostly when I was trying to fall asleep, or sitting in a silent room, I would hear occasional sounds that I couldn't connect at first. Gradually, I determined they were hospital sounds, stretchers being rolled across tiled floors, beeping from machines, rapid chatter between nurses and doctors. Although I figured anyone who had suffered as much trauma as I had would experience some degree of whatever I was experiencing, I decided to bring it up with my doctor. He told me it was perfectly normal for someone in my circumstances, and he would prescribe me a sleep aid if I felt it was necessary. I told him it wasn't a big deal. I was just satisfied that a doctor could explain my symptoms. The odd glimpses of what seemed to be my past only increased in frequency. When I slept, I finally dreamed again, but it was always the same thing. If I saw anything at all, it was a hospital room. Sometimes there were people in the room, and sometimes I was alone with the machines. There was one night in particular in which the dream was more vivid and gripping than usual. My eyes opened wearily to see Sarah asleep on the chair beside my hospital bed. I croaked. She jerked awake. "Henry!" She scrambled to my side, clutching my hand. At this point, it occurred to me that I was dreaming. I stared right into Sarah's eyes. "I'm asleep right now." She seemed concerned. "No, Henry, you're finally awake. I'm right here. It's been so long." Of course you would say that. "You're part of my dream." I smiled, amused. "I'll probably wake up any second." But as I spoke, the familiar soreness caught up to me all at once. It practically knocked the wind from my lungs. "Henry, no!" Her distress was now evident. "I don't know what you're talking about. Stay with me, Henry. Stay awake. Look at me." I shook my head defiantly and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in my own bed. It was about 3 a.m. I sat awake, pondering what I had just seen. I thought I heard Sarah crying again, even though I could see her sleeping beside me. When Sarah finally woke up, she rolled over and laid an arm across my chest. "Good morning, big guy," she smiled groggily. "If I was asleep right now, would you tell me?" I asked. "What?" she chuckled. "It's kind of heavy stuff to drop on a sleepy person. Just bear with me. If I was asleep right now, dreaming, would you tell me?" "Well, I feel pretty real," she noted, patting different parts of her body. "Do you think I'm not real?" "Of course not," I said. We got ready for a day. I couldn't stop thinking about my dream, though. I noticed that when I tried really hard to space out at work and listen closely enough, I could hear the hospital sounds more clearly. I was naturally concerned about this. That night, I went to bed early, and just as I thought, I was transported immediately to the hospital bed. I felt the thin sheets beneath my fingers. I opened my eyes, and Sarah was reading a book in the same chair as before. I just looked at her for a long time, trying to discern if she was real. She certainly seemed real enough. She turned pages with the same flourish that she always had, and chewed on one of the temples of her reading glasses. Eventually, she looked up and met my eyes. "You're awake again!" "Victoria! Paul! He's awake!" My parents entered the room moments later, looking excited. I talked with them all for a long time. Of course, my parents too denied the fact that I was asleep, but that topic passed quickly. Instead, we discussed my condition. I had been in a coma for almost 3 months with little response. They had been slowly losing hope for my recovery until my brain showed signs of activity. Since that time, they had been visiting me frequently, hoping that I would wake up. It seemed a pretty convincing story. After many hours of talking, I had to stop. I was legitimately sleepy. Of course, they all understood, and I fell back asleep. Only this time, I didn't wake up in my own bed. I woke up in the same hospital bed a few hours later. I had to think for a very long time, but eventually concluded that I must have imagined my miraculous recovery and had been in a coma the whole time after all. As you can imagine, it was hard to accept at first. Since then, I have been making a second recovery, which has been slower and less successful than the first. That's why, for a long time, I was mostly convinced that I'm really awake this time. Nobody walks after getting blindsided by a train, at least not without lots of hard work. I still only left my wheelchair on crutches, and it's been 6 years. It probably sounds like a bittersweet ending, and at one point I agreed. I was prepared to live happily ever after in my wheelchair, and maybe even graduate to crutches someday, except for one thing. When I'm getting ready for bed, after I turn off my lamp, and my head hits the pillow, I can still hear them. The faint sounds of a busy hospital. I know that many of you will say, but I'm real. This is real life. Of course you're awake. But that's what you're supposed to say. Nobody's going to tell me I'm fake. You're dreaming. Wake up. I'm still asleep, and I've learned to deal with it. I know that nobody I meet during this day is real, but I'm tired, so I just pretend. And that will have to do. Wait, does that mean I'm not real if I'm reading this? That was actually really good. Like, you know, I love stories that aren't like, "There's a man in my closet. There's a monster on the wall." I like stories that are things that could legitimately happen, which I think I said this last time, and then people were like, well, you know, the no sleep rules might not allow for such a thing, but I love stories that, oh my gosh, that feel like they can happen, you know? It's my favorite thing, it's my vibe, and it's so good. Because how would you know if you've ever actually woken up? That's the thing, you wouldn't. Are you even awake right now? Am I even real? Are you even actually watching a YouTube video right now? Anyways, on to the next one. I listened to a true crime podcast about myself, and this is by Robert Mort. Every night on my walk home from work, I listen to true crime podcasts. Even though my favorite podcast already released their episode for the week, the app said there was a new one. Excited, I hit play. It was a small town. The kind that still has mom and pop shops lining the street. The kind where everyone knows your name. But little did the residents know that they would soon be rocked by a horrible crime. I stopped by a traffic light. The red glowed in the darkness, glinting off the wet street. A black SUV sloshed by. Across from me, eerie blue refrigerator lights glowed from inside a corner deli. The chairs all lined up on their tables, feet in the air, the signal turned to walk. That chilly September evening was no different for the young student. She'd left her shift at the local store and walked back home, except she never made it home. Young student, local store. Damn, this was hitting close to home. I was a part-time student at Franklin Community College and worked at the local convenience store. And of course, I was walking home. I glanced behind me, looking at the alleyway behind Alessandro's Pizza, which was dark except for the neon light spilling from the sign. Her boyfriend reported her missing the next day. The town conducted a volunteer-led search, and after 2 days, they found something. Dread formed in my stomach, anticipating a body, but what he said next was so much worse. Washed up on the shore of Worthington Lake, they found a pair of size 9 red Converse sneakers. I stopped, and I looked down at my red Converse sneakers, damp from the rain. What the hell? My heart began to pound. The shoes were sent to a forensic analyst who would compare its wear pattern to another pair of her shoes to try and determine if they belonged to the victim. A rumbling sound made me jump. I turned to see a dark SUV turning left at the intersection. Didn't I see that car a few minutes ago? Maybe it's following me, and the car passed me and disappeared into the darkness. Come on, Sarah, get a grip. Why is everyone named Sarah tonight? Converse are popular sneakers. A little out of fashion, but still. What? A little out of fashion? Converse are timeless. 9 is a common women's shoe size. And what college student doesn't have some sort of job? What, you think you're listening to some sort of prophecy of your own death? Yeah, right. After a few weeks, the results came back. The analyst was certain. The shoes belonged to none other than Sarah Campbell. Blood drained from my face. Sarah Campbell. My name, what the hell, how? I didn't have time to think. I forced myself to move. I broke into a run. The small shops turned into a colorful blur. Searching the lake came up empty. Without a body, crime is hard to solve. But police didn't give up. And finally, a witness came forward. Someone had seen a car parked at the lake that night, around 2 a.m. A black SUV with darkened windows. No. What the hell is going on? I whipped around. The street was empty, no people, no cars, no witnesses, said the little voice in the back of my mind. The one that's watched way too many true crime shows. My eyes scanned the shops. All closed. There were 6 black SUVs matching the witness's description in the Franklin area. But one of them in particular caught Detective Nolan's eye. It belonged to John Kelly, a registered sex offender. The sound was so soft I almost didn't hear it over the voice of the podcast. I whipped around, and there it was. 2 blaring white headlights behind me coming from a black SUV. I forced my legs to pump faster. The car didn't speed up. It crawled along, slowly, taking its time. Like the driver knew he could catch me no matter what. I glanced back, trying to make him out behind the darkened windshield, but the headlights were too bright to see anything. Kelly wasn't just a registered sex offender. He'd been convicted of assaulting a woman he worked with, who had multiple piercings and short dark hair, just like Sarah. The car crawled down the road, stalking me like a lioness stalks her prey. I veered left onto our dark residential street. Just a few more steps. Headlights flashed across me, illuminating my running shadow on the pavement. I didn't look back, I just ran as fast as I possibly could. The little brown house with the yellow shutters came into view. I sprinted across the grass, grabbing my keys from my pocket. Click. I threw the door open and slammed it shut behind me. Then I turned the deadbolt, collapsed against the door, and began crying. I heard the rush of the car passing our house continuing down the road. But I wasn't safe. Gabe wasn't home yet. I was alone, in a dark house, with someone driving down the street who knew exactly where I lived. Still sobbing, I checked all the locks. Then I called Gabe, who assured me he was 5 minutes away. I made my way down the dark hallway and headed into the bathroom. Then I set my phone on the counter, grabbed a clump of tissues, and began to blow my nose. Click. I jumped, whipped around, but it wasn't coming from outside the door. My phone screen lit up, the podcast was still playing. I must have hit it when I put the phone down. It had skipped several minutes forward according to the play indicator. What do you think happened to Sarah? The baritone voice asked. I reached for it to turn it off. Well, she told me she wanted to run away before. I stopped dead. It was Gabe's voice. Clear as day coming from the speakers. She did? Why? The voice asked. She wasn't happy with her grades, her job, her parents. She told me sometimes she'd dream of just moving to some random state and leaving it all behind. I froze, staring at the mirror. Never said that? Never! Gabe was lying? I mean, that was hurtful to me as her boyfriend, you know? I thought we were gonna get married someday. But apparently she didn't feel the same way. My heart pounded in my ears. So you think she just skipped town and is happily living her life out somewhere else, rather than being abducted or murdered? Pause. Yes. That's exactly what I think. That's all for now. Thank you to our listeners. The outro played. I stared at my reflection, everything coming down all at once. My mind trying to race and catch up with what it meant. The front door creaked open. Footsteps sounded outside. Sarah? I'm back. I backed away from the door. Sarah? My eyes fell on the window. I ran over to it, turned the lock. Push. I popped the screen out. Then I swung a leg over, pulled myself through the window, and ran as fast as I could. So a lot of people were confused and were like, I need a part 2. But I think the implication is that Gabe was planning on killing her. How the podcast was giving her a heads up, I don't know, but thanks to the podcaster. So I think the implication is that it was Gabe who was gonna do it. Honestly, that was really slay. Let's clap it up. Anyways, on to the next one. So this one I actually have previously heard. I think it was like a scary video, I want to say. Someone turned a no sleep story into like an animated short. So unfortunately I do know this one going in, but it is honestly one of the better ones out there. And it's a good story, so we're going to read it. Autopilot by SCARIEST. Have you ever forgotten your phone? When did you realize you'd forgotten it? I'm guessing you didn't just smack your forehead and exclaim, damn, apropos of nothing. The realization probably didn't dawn on you spontaneously. More likely, you reached for your phone, prying open your pocket or handbag, and were momentarily confused by it not being there. Then you did a mental restep of this morning's events. Shoot. In my case, my phone's alarm woke me up as normal, but I realized the battery was lower than I expected. It was a new phone, and it had this annoying habit of leaving applications running that drained the battery overnight. So, I put it on to charge while I showered instead of into my bag like normal. It was a momentary slip-up from the routine, but that was all it took. Once in the shower, my brain got back into the routine it follows every morning, and that was it. Forgotten. This wasn't just me being clumsy, as I later researched. This is a recognized brain function. Your brain doesn't just work on one level. It works on many. Like when you're walking somewhere, you think about your destination and avoiding hazards, but you don't need to think about keeping your legs moving properly. If you did, the entire world would turn into one massive hilarious 𝘞𝘦𝘭𝘰𝘮𝑦 cosplay. I don't know what that means. I wasn't thinking about regulating my breathing. I was thinking about whether I should grab a coffee on the drive to work. I did. I wasn't thinking about moving my breakfast through my intestines. I was wondering whether I'd finish on time to pick up my daughter Emily from nursery after work or get stuck with another late fee. This is the thing. There's a level of your brain that just deals with routine, so that the rest of the brain can think about other things. Think about it. Think about your last commute. What do you actually remember? Little, if anything, probably. Most common journeys blur into one, and recalling anyone in particular is scientifically proven to be difficult. Do something often enough, and it becomes routine. Keep doing it, and it stops being processed by the thinking bit of the brain, and it gets relegated to a part of the brain dedicated to dealing with routine. Your brain keeps doing it without you thinking about it. Soon, you think about your routine to work as much as you do keeping your legs moving when you walk. As in, not at all. Most people call it autopilot, but there's a danger there. If you have a break in your routine, your ability to remember and account for the break is only as good as your ability to stop your brain going into routine mode. My ability to remember my phone being on the counter is only as reliable as my ability to stop my brain entering morning routine mode, which would dictate that my phone is actually in my bag. But I didn't stop my brain entering routine mode. I got in the shower as normal. Routine started. Exception forgotten. Autopilot engaged. My brain was back in the routine. I showered. I shaved. The radio forecasts amazing weather. I gave Emily her breakfast and loaded her into the car. She was so adorable that morning. She complained about the bad sun in the morning blinding her, saying that it stopped her having a little sleep on the way to the nursery, and left. That was the routine. It didn't matter that my phone was on the counter charging silently. My brain was in the routine, and in the routine, my phone was in the bag. This is why I forgot my phone. Not clumsiness, not negligence, nothing more than my brain entering routine mode and overriding the exception. Autopilot engaged. I left for work. It's a swelteringly hot day already. The bad sun had been burning since before my traitorously absent phone woke me. The steering wheel was burning hot to the touch when I sat down. I think I heard Emily shift over behind my driver's seat to get out of the glare. But I got to work, submitted the report, attended the morning meeting. It's not until I took a quick coffee break and reached for my phone that the illusion shattered. I did a mental re-step. I remembered the dying battery. I remembered putting it on to charge. I remember leaving it there. My phone was on the counter. Autopilot disengaged. Again, therein lies the danger. Until you have that moment, the moment you reach for your phone and shatter the illusion, that part of the brain is still in routine mode. It has no reason to question the facts of the routine. That's why it's a routine. Attrition of repetition. It's not as if anyone could say, "Why didn't you remember your phone? Didn't it occur to you? How could you forget? You must be negligent." This is to miss the point. My brain was telling me the routine was completed as normal, despite the fact that it wasn't. It wasn't that I forgot my phone. According to my brain, according to the routine, my phone was in my bag. Why would I think to question it? Why would I check? Why would I suddenly remember out of nowhere that my phone was on the counter? My brain was wired into the routine, and the routine was that my phone was in the bag. The day continued to bake. The morning haze gave way to the relentless fever heat of the afternoon. Tarmac bubbled. The direct beams of the heat threatened to crack the pavement. People swapped coffees for iced smoothies. Jackets discarded, sleeves rolled up, ties loosened, brows mopped. The park slowly filled with sunbathers and barbecues. Window frames threatened to warp. The thermometer continued to swell. Thank heavens the offices were air-conditioned. But as ever, the furnace of the day gave way to a cooler evening. Another day, another dollar. Still cursing myself for forgetting my phone, I drove home. The day's heat had baked the inside of the car, releasing a horrible smell from somewhere. When I arrived on the driveway, the stones crunching comfortingly under my tires, my wife greeted me at the door. "Where's Emily?" Shoot, as if the phone wasn't bad enough. After everything, I'd left Emily at the freaking nursery after all. I immediately sped back to the nursery. I got to the door and started practicing my excuses, wondering vainly if I could charm my way out of a late fee. I saw a piece of paper stuck to the door. "Due to vandalism overnight, please use side door. Today only." Overnight? What? The door was fine this morning. I froze. My knees shook. Vandals, a change in routine. My phone was on the counter. I hadn't been here this morning. My phone was on the counter. I'd driven past because I was drinking my coffee. I'd not dropped off Emily. My phone was on the counter. She moved her seat. I hadn't seen her in the mirror. My phone was on the counter. She'd fallen asleep out of the bed, son. She didn't speak when I drove past her nursery. My phone was on the counter. She changed the routine. My phone was on the counter. She changed the routine and I'd forgotten to drop her off. My phone was on the counter. 9 hours. That car. That baking sun. No air, no water, no power, no help. That heat. The steering wheel too hot to touch. That smell. I walked to the car door. Numb. Shock. I opened the door. My phone was on the counter and my daughter was dead. Autopilot disengaged. Yeah, so in case you don't know, he never dropped off his daughter, and she's dead in the back of his car and has been cooking that entire time. Yeah, I don't remember who told the story, but when I first heard it, I was absolutely shocked. It was Sapphire who used to host Snarled on YouTube. I guess people don't understand that sometimes these things do happen. I'm sure there's been someone who's accidentally done this, and it's horrible to think. That's a really good one. It's a classic. Let's clap it up. So, it's now that time of the night where we read one last good one for the night. So everyone, settle in, get comfortable, and let's just read our final post. Her name was Emma. By a lack of coasters. Her name was Emma. That's what everyone called her anyways. Sometimes they would call her M. Sometimes someone would slip up and call her Emily. She was a part of our group of girlfriends growing up in a large town, not quite big enough to be a city, but big enough that there was still privacy between neighbors. We called ourselves the Unbreakable Six, because there was me, Summer, Mel, Nina, and Jules, and there was Emma. Emma started off as a practical joke by the other girls in the 4th grade. It was probably Jules that started it. She was always playing pranks with people. In high school, she even got suspended once for going too far, and had to babysit for hours to buy that girl a new cell phone. Or maybe it was Summer, who always seemed too busy with music and band to think of such an elaborate prank. Or maybe it was Mel and Nina, who were best friends and could have lived without us, always conspiring together like they were twin sisters. Either way, I bought my lunch, cold cut sandwich and carrot sticks and a pint of orange juice. I couldn't stand milk. It would account for how short I ended up being. And walked over to our lunch table. Jules looked excited, waving me over to them. Lot, look! I wasn't sure where I was supposed to be looking. This is Emma. She moved here from Los Angeles. We lived far inland and into the boonies. Los Angeles was glitzy and glamorous and chic compared to the flat houses and half-rate high school football that was the only real source of entertainment in the area. What? Los Angeles, dummy, Jules said, rolling her eyes. She's not in our class. She's in Miss Lark's, but she's the same grade as us. Isn't that cool? I still wasn't sure where I was supposed to be looking. I sat down with my tray uneasily, wondering what I was supposed to see. Who? Summer jabbed me in the side. You're being rude, she hissed quietly. Summer was all about rules and manners. Say hi to Emma. I looked around our table, from Jules to Mel to Nina to Summer and back to Jules, who was waiting impatiently. I don't know. I was weak. I wanted to fit in. I didn't get it. Hi, Emma. They all seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, like I was making everything awkward. Charlotte's weird sometimes, but her brother has a Nintendo that he lets us play with sometimes. They kept on talking, chatting about whatever 4th grade girls chat about, and I ignored it. If they wanted to play that prank, then that was fine. I wasn't going to buy into it. That's how Emma became a normal part of our lives. It was crazy. We would buy her birthday presents, and they'd disappear like they were taken. I wondered how many candle-making kits and Mancala games Jules had piling up in her closet after all these birthdays. One year, Mel even got Emma a really nice necklace, and that disappeared too. We never went to her house. I asked Nina about it when I was sure that Emma wasn't there. She gave me this scandalized look. Lot, don't be rude. Emma's family doesn't have that much money. She's embarrassed to let us come over. She told Mel that, who told me, and it makes sense. I mean, what she wears all the time. I mean, we still love her, we'll always love her, she's one of us, but don't rub in the fact that we can't go to her house. That's mean. After I was scolded so wholeheartedly by Nina, I didn't ask again. They were covering their bases really well, and by 7th grade, I had to accept that they were taking this prank all the way. Okay, just a quick moment of clarity. Lot believes from the ages of however old you are in 4th grade to now 7th grade, they're still pranking her about Emma. You didn't think to get checked in with a therapist or something? It was weirdly comforting in a way. There was this silent friend that I never saw, but she was always around. We would leave seats open for her, and when we did the buddy system, someone always had Emma walk into the bathroom by herself. When we decided that we wanted to be lame and come up with a name of our group of friends, we decided on the Unbreakable Six, even though there were really only 5 of us. I was curious in sophomore year of high school when we were having a sleepover. Summer was at band practice late, and Emma couldn't make it. She had to work on her science project, according to Mel. So I asked Jules, the likely mastermind behind it all, if you were going to write a story about Emma, like her biography, how would you describe her, down to every detail? Jules loves stuff like that. She wanted to be a writer someday. Well, she's taller than you, which isn't hard. I threw a pillow at her that she dodged deftly. She's medium build. Jules dropped her voice to a whisper. Even though she gained a little weight recently, but we're not going to tell her, and she's still beautiful. And she has green eyes and brown hair, and she's got freckles. She hates getting her picture taken. She's nice, but quiet, and she dances really beautifully. I mean, you've seen her, right? Of course, that time, a few months ago when we turned on some music and danced around together to practice dancing at homecoming, so we didn't look weird or do it wrong. We stopped after a while and oohed and awed at an empty space for a while. I didn't ask any more questions. I knew they would keep up the charade for as long as they could manage. It was our senior year of high school that it happened. Okay, so we went from 4th grade to senior year, and you're still thinking this is a prank? I don't know why it set me off. Not really. It was something little, something stupid. We were hanging out in Nina's pool, even though it was still too cold to swim. Teeth chattering and goosebumps rising on our skin, we were waiting for the jacuzzi to heat up to jump in. The cold sunlight cast a long shadow, and the wine coolers we snuck in earlier was making that shadow seem menacing. It was annoying for me for reasons I can't place. Look at Emma, Lot, Jules called. She wolf whistled and hooted, over the top like Jules always is. Hot mama, look at that booty! I didn't know where to look, like always. Like, for the past 9 years of my life, I didn't know where to look. Since the 4th grade at our lunch table, dancing in Summer's living room, homecoming, football games, at the park, in class, everywhere. I didn't know where to look because Emma wasn't there. That's when I snapped. F Emma, I screamed, and F all of you. Have you been waiting for this? The moment I completely lose my mind? Well, here it is! I waved my arms around, manic and furious. Emma isn't real. Emma isn't real! I looked at their confused faces. Oh, you're gonna keep this up? I hate you guys. You've always done this, made me the butt of your stupid prank for almost 10 years, guys. 10 years! I slipped a little on the wet concrete, but regained my balance. Forget you. I hate you so much. Tears welled in my eyes. Years and years of pent-up frustration finally spilling over. Emma was some stupid prank that got out of hand, and I can't believe that none of you have ever had the balls to tell me that it was a stupid prank. No, it had to keep going. You had to keep laughing behind my back. It's not fair. Summer was furious. Lot, don't be this way. Emma was right there and you're being a jerk. Why are you doing this? Are you mad? Mel spoke up in a tiny voice. Lot, you look hot too. I mean, you look good in your bathing suit too. Yeah, but don't take out your anger on Emma. Gosh, Nina said, rolling her eyes. Nina walked over to the side of the pool and reached out a hand like she was rubbing someone's back. It's okay, Emma. Lot's just under a lot of stress right now, figuring out where she wants to go for college. Shut up! I howled miserably. Stop it! Emma isn't real! She's not there! How could you guys do this to me? They were starting to look scared. They were really invested in this prank. I wondered what the end game was, when they were going to start laughing, when they were going to jump up and say, "Gotcha, I had enough of this. If they wanted to play charades, then let's play charades." The next part was a blur. I don't remember it, not even now. But I walked over to where Emma was and kicked at the air. I heard a scream and I slipped on the slick, wet concrete and hit my head. There was blood everywhere. There was so much screaming, but I kept on kicking and punching and fighting until I blacked out completely. I came to a day later in the hospital. My parents were there and so were my friends. They were pale and tired and miserable looking. My heart panged. I must have really scared them. When my parents left, Jules approached me. She took my hand. She began crying. The others started crying too. "I'm sorry, Lot," she wept. "I'm really sorry." It was almost frightening, looking at the way my friends were. They were beside themselves in the privacy of the hospital room. I started crying too. I wasn't sure why, but I started stammering apologies too, like if we all said sorry things could go back to the way they did. "I'm sorry," I cried. Summer was the only one who didn't look like she forgave me completely. She looked at me, eyes red and cheeks pink and wobbly chinned, and said, "Are you?" I didn't have to answer. The nurse came in to change the bandages on my head. For the rest of the year, no one mentioned Emma. Emma only belonged to her tight-knit group of friends, so there was no mention of Emma. One time a cop came to our principal's office, and Mel and Nina were quick to drag us away. After the accident, I withdrew from everyone. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't go to Summer's recital. I didn't go to Mel's birthday party. I didn't do anything. I didn't go to prom, just stared at the ceiling, wondering what had happened. Emma was in most of my life, and now she felt like a ghost. I graduated high school and left immediately to go to a university far away in Southern California, where the weather was always perfect, and the beach was a 5-minute walk away. I started to recover. I realized that I was depressed after what had happened, understanding that my best friends chose a punchline over me. Unbreakable 6, yeah right. I got good grades, volunteered at an animal shelter, found a boyfriend. He was nice to me, even when I got quiet when he asked about high school. He never pushed, just held me when I had bad days and made me pancakes. It was 4 years later, when I was about to finish up college, that I ran into an old classmate from high school. Her name was Annie. She hung out with a different crowd than me and my friends. Most people did. The 5 of us were in a clique of our own, separated from everyone else. I ran into her in our apartment complex. It turns out that she was living there the whole time and we didn't know. I wasn't necessarily friends with her, but overreacted the way you do when you see someone that you haven't seen in a long time. It's been forever! Oh my gosh. I went to her apartment for coffee and saw that she was packing up her things. Moving back home for a while until I find a job. Yuck. I saw a thick book on the sofa. Oh yeah, that's our senior yearbook. I was flipping through it when I found it on my bookshelf. I didn't bother getting a yearbook. I didn't have friends at the end of high school, but I was curious to see what I looked like back then. If I had gained or lost weight, if my skin had gotten any better. I opened up the first page and was instantly confused. For Emma? I read out loud on the first page. It was a dedication. My mind raced. Was there someone named Emma in our year? "Yeah, it's really sad what happened to her," Annie said, handing me a mug of hot coffee. I flipped through the yearbook looking for a trace of Emma. Then I found it. My heart stopped, mouth going dry. My hands shook as I held the yearbook, looking at the photograph. It was a picture of the Unbreakable 6. We stood with our arms slung around hips and shoulders, sticking close together for the photograph. There was Summer at the end, then me, then Jules, then Mel, then Nina, then... I had never seen this girl before in my life. Never, but there she was. Can't even remember getting this picture taken. She was right there at the end. Green eyes, brown hair, muffin top, shy smile, threadbare shirt, and ripped jeans. Looking straight at the camera like the rest of us. She looked as normal as can be. Just another teenage girl. Annie looked over my shoulder. Huh, there you all are. What did you call yourselves again? What happened to her? I couldn't touch her photograph. Just let my shaking finger hover over her face. Annie fell quiet. Well, I guess you might not really remember it that well after your head injury. And you just kind of faded away from everything, stopped doing much at all. But Emma disappeared. Out of nowhere. The cops came by once to ask questions, but her parents were both porn junkies, so no one really cared. Just another girl that disappeared. I left Annie and went back to my apartment, the one that I shared with my boyfriend. He took one look at my face and started boiling some water for tea, grabbed a blanket to throw over my shoulders. I pulled away from him, locked myself in my room. I stared at the ceiling. I was 18 again, lost and confused. The girl's green eyes haunted me. Emma's eyes haunted me. I went on Facebook and found my old friends, my best friends, and I told them, please meet me back at home. It's important. I returned to our big town, little city, went to the newest Starbucks and waited. They trickled in, one by one. Jules, a small-time blogger who works at an Italian restaurant until she made it big. Summer, brown and freckled from band camp, coaching kids for their field shows. Nina, the hot librarian at their old high school. Mel, her belly swollen with her second child. Wedding ring secured to her left hand by her high school sweetheart. My friends were not the same, and neither was I. I got to the chase. I couldn't spare a moment for small talk. What happened to Emma? They exchanged uneasy glances. They knew this was coming. Nothing, Jules said with finality. Emma wasn't real. She was just a trick, Nina said softly. She was a prank. I figured they might pull this. I reached into my bag and slammed the yearbook down on the table, making our drinks rattle, and one fall over, spilling tea onto the ground. No one moved to try to pick it up. They stared at the yearbook instead. Emma was real, I whispered. Emma was real. What happened to her? Nothing. Cut the crap, Jules! Summer snapped. She turned to me. Lot, you killed Emma that day. By the pool. You went nuts and kicked her and kept kicking her when you slipped and messed up your head and you bashed her head and she fell in the pool and it was too late to save her and we had to worry about you and— Summer! Jules shrieked, swatting her in the arm. I was silent, absorbing what Summer said. Mel spoke in a tiny voice. Lot, we weren't gonna let you go to jail. I looked up at my friends, tears running down my cheeks. Why? Nina reached across the table and took my hand. She squeezed it hard. Because we're the Unbreakable Six. We don't break because one went crazy and another's dead. I excused myself to the restroom and wept for what seemed like hours. It couldn't have been that long, but there were angry knocks on the door from other patrons who needed the restroom. I sat there on the dirty floor sobbing until I had cried everything out. I came out where my friends, my best friends, were still waiting. I sat down in my seat and faced them. I want to turn myself in. There was an outcry of different responses. Summer seemed willing, ready to have me turn myself into the police. Jules yelled out about all of them getting into trouble. Mel started to cry. You don't have to, Nina said. You don't have to. We got rid of all the evidence. We buried her far away where no one would find her. I want to turn myself in, I repeated firmly. I killed her. I'll tell the cops that it was just me, that I buried her. Tell me where she is so I can tell them where I put her. None of you will get in trouble. It wasn't your fault. I thought I had finished crying. I thought I had nothing left, but I choked out what I wanted to say for so long. I never saw her. They looked at me expectantly. I never saw her, not once. I thought it was just a big prank you were playing on me. I didn't want you to laugh at me. The girl in the yearbook I had never seen before. I just played along. Nina nodded. I thought it was weird that you were always so cold to her, like you didn't even acknowledge her. She really liked you, Mel said. She thought you were so smart that you were going to go out in the world and do amazing things. She would always talk about that. I felt as though my heart would burst. I swear I never saw her. Something must be wrong with me, but I never saw or heard her. I cleared my throat. Show me where you buried her. We got into Summer's car and drove out far, into a park in a different city. The park was huge and overgrown, like no one had been there to take care of it in a long, long time. I got out of the car, and left behind by a worker long ago was a rusty shovel. I took it with me. Jules led the way, deep into the park, deep through the trees, until we came to a small clearing. The dirt wasn't fresh, there were no markers or indicators, but the way my friends' faces paled at the sight, I knew this was it. Emma was there under our feet. I gotta see her, I whispered. I dug the shovel into the ground. I gotta see her. Mel didn't want to see anything, so she and Nina left back for the car. Jules and Summer found different tools, a hoe and a rake, and we started digging. Blisters rose and popped on my hands from the old shovel. but I kept digging as beads of sweat rolled down my neck, my back. The three of us worked together in silence, digging up our best friend. Suddenly Summer jumped back in disgust, throwing her hoe aside. Jules did the same, stepping out of the hole. We looked down. Summer gagged, covering her mouth and nose, and Jules shook her head at the sight. Me? I laughed and laughed and laughed, tears streaming down my face, laughing until it hurt as I looked down into an empty grave. I like ones that leave you with a little bit of confusion at the end. And I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. That was really good. Very, very long, so this video is probably gonna end up like 10,000 minutes. Yeah, that was our final one of the night. Really good premise, really good plot, really loved it. Some people have theorized that maybe she was Emma, but that was r/no sleep. I actually really do appreciate the subreddit, because when it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's bad, but when it's good, it's good. All these stories will be linked down below if you want to read them yourself, as well as if you want to just check out the subreddit, that'll be linked too. I've often wanted to start writing on Reddit, but I get so nervy, I get so scared that my stories are going to be cringe and corny and people look at me like I'm a little weird fool. But yeah, all credit to our amazing authors tonight. Let's clap it up. They really got us in the spooky, spooky season. So hopefully you all enjoyed and you're feeling a little more into the spooky season. What the frick? So thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and hopefully I will see you all here next time for more Spooky Month.